I called somebody on the phone yesterday and said, I have a 3-family in a market that you buy property priced at roughly $100,000 below fair market value. I call you up and say, hey, I have a lead for you that meets what you are looking for, and you can make $100,000 on this property, but you want to live in a town next over. If you are even pausing one time when I share this information with you, you're done. I'm never sending you anything ever again.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the What It Takes podcast. I'm joined today by Zachary Gray. Zach, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on today, and I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to connect with, yourself, as well as hopefully provide some insight into, some of my backstory pertaining to, real estate, as well as just, personal items, and hopefully provide some value to some of the listeners that you have.
Absolutely, dude. So one of the things that really stood out with you is obviously you are now the co-founder of Freedom Management. You have a portfolio of more than 300 doors. But what was really cool about you was your backstory, right? Where you came from and how you managed to achieve what you've achieved today. I mean, you came from quite financial struggles, first generation college graduate. You've also built up several successful businesses throughout the years. Now with this one, you were talking about the gym thing that you were doing on our previous call, which is also really cool. But talk to me a little bit about what was your early background like?
Yeah, so just to provide like a pretty kind of concise, abridged backstory of my life. Effectively, I was 18 years old. I was in the midst of applying for colleges. I got into all the schools that I applied to. I was pretty academically successful, and at that time, my parents notified me that we were going to be going through bankruptcy. We were losing our house, and basically, there was no way for me to be able to pay for school. I ended up graduating from high school. I then worked 2 full-time jobs, roughly 80 hours a week through the summer to be able to pay for my freshman year in cash. I then ended up working full-time for my freshman year to be able to pay for my second semester.
Hold on just one second. You self-funded your first semester or your first year in college.
Yeah, so I basically worked 80 hours a week for the summer, paid for my first semester in cash, had a little bit of money left over, and then worked full time for my first and second semester to pay for my second semester in cash as well.
That is crazy. Where did that drive come from? Because I know a lot of young people today that are in similar situations, but not all of them would be willing to work 80 hours a week to pay for their own college.
Yeah, I would just say at that point, like my mindset is losing's not an option, right? So like my outlook on it is like,
where did that come from?
If I don't go to college, I'm probably going to work in a labor-oriented profession, and I'm probably not going to have a whole lot of upside. And I wasn't really open to that idea. And so at the end of the day, if I wanted to get myself to move up in the social class, I had to do whatever it took.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what
was your drive. It was like the thing that really pushed you was the pain that you'd be in imagining that future. So you saw yourself and were like, if I don't achieve this, that will be the alternative, and I don't want that alternative.
Absolutely. And then also secondarily, like my parents moved from a pretty kind of rugged town, blue collar, into like a more kind of high quality, very solid academic environment in order for me and my siblings to prosper. And I think that if I didn't make use of that, and my parents, basically sacrificed their whole life and actually ended up losing the house because of that, then it was for what exactly?
Yeah. And so you managed to pay for college. What happens next in your life?
Yeah. So at that time, I realized how painstaking that was and that I didn't really want to do it again. So I sort of tried to start exploring alternatives. And then I ended up actually settling on enlisting in the military. So I ended up enlisting in the military, which allowed for me to pay for the remaining 3 years of my degree for free. But not only that, my entire financial aid package was then reimbursed to me. So I actually got paid roughly about $13,000 to $15,000 a year to go to school. So I graduated with roughly $50K in my account.
Oh, wow. And obviously when you have money like that, it's the temptation to use it can be pretty big, right? Like you have $50K can splurge it on like a new PlayStation or car or whatever. What did you do with your money?
My mindset has always been delayed gratification. Like I've been that way from the jump. Um, the military was a delayed gratification play. I got super into fitness. Fitness is a super delayed gratification play in general as a hobby. And so, just in general, what I ended up doing is I ended up taking the money. I started exploring investing in the stock market, which I found out I was really bad at. And
Did you
I
lose a
was
lot of money?
I didn't lose a crazy amount of money. Maybe I lost like maybe 10 grand at the most.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but
Well,
at the end,
that's, you know,
but at the end of the day, it's like it's all a learning lesson. Like what it comes down to is
yeah.
I understood. I went to school for finance, so
Yeah.
I my I very adamantly understood the need to become knowledgeable and proficient in allocating your resources to make more resources. And
Yeah.
I think that was sort of where it stemmed from. And then I think that as time went along, I became more interested in real estate investing. But how I ended up there is kind of a roundabout way as well.
Well, what I really find interesting about you, Zachary, is the mindset that you had at that age, right? I don't know if this comes from, what you went through, but obviously something shaped that. I mean, did you have role models growing up? Did you learn from people? I mean, who were they?
Yeah. So I always tell this story, and it's kind of it's I attribute it to the same thing pretty much every single time. So my
Hmm.
dad was a extremely passionate card collector. So
Okay.
baseball, basketball, football, you name it. My dad
Hmm.
probably had 10, 15, 20,000 sports cards.
That's
Um,
crazy.
and they filled an entire closet. And it was just box on box on box on box. And what he would do at night, almost every night, is he would sit
Hmm.
down and he would put sports on the TV, and then he would pull out a
Hmm.
box of cards and he would go through them, sort them, organize them by category, by sport, by year, by you name it. And
Hmm.
as a kid, I became super interested in it. And so what I tried to do is I tried to start to understand what what factors would allow for me to differentiate between high quality cards and low quality cards. And so
Yeah.
what I determined was it had a lot to do with the athlete. And so
Mm.
my dad taught me how to start to analyze statistics. So, here I am like a 3, 4, 5, 6 year old, right? And I'm like analyzing statistics on the back of baseball cards, like on like a 10x scale, right?
Yeah.
So I think that probably wired me to be pretty solid at math, I hope. But
Yeah. I mean,
needless to
if you're doing that at that age, absolutely.
yeah. So
Like,
needless to say is that so where this kind of fits into this whole scenario is that my dad would show me examples of players, and 90% of the time, the statistics were the differentiator between who was a better player and who was not. However,
yeah.
there were instances in which I would present two high quality players, and my dad, I would say, hey, player A is better than player B. And my dad would say,
Mm.
no. And I was like, well, the stats on player A are better than the stats on player B. And my dad
Yeah.
would always say, that may be true. They're close. However, player B is a winner. They win.
Huh.
And
Huh.
so I always basically what I determined was the differentiator, the trump card, the superiority component came back to who wins. And so then
Yes.
as a young kid, I sort of started to idolize the players that had high work ethic, high integrity, high, and sort of like that sort of killer instinct, win at all costs mentality. And so when you look at people who were super influential to me, I was super in on the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the Mamba
Mm.
mentality, the Tom Brady's, the people who were just completely psychotic on a different level, devoted to their craft,
Mm.
and pair that with my dad, who was the sole provider and was going to work at 5 a.m., coming home at 7 p.m., right?
Mm.
The only thing that I knew was these people are absolute mutants in regards to work ethic, and my father is the same, and this is how shit works.
Yeah.
And this is what results in progress. So like
Mm.
I was sort of in that mindset from a very young age as like this is what it takes.
Yeah. I like that. This is what it takes, kind of the theme of the podcast as well, right? What does it take to succeed? And I think one of the key things that a lot of people could also really benefit from is model the best, right? Look at who wins, who has achieved what you want to achieve, and probably even more than that, and go study them, right? I mean, this is how you essentially learn the best practice, best principle to go on and succeed. So that was sort of your influences, and you got out of. So going back to your story, so now you finished your military, you had 50K in the account, you did a little bit of trading, lost 10K. um what happens next in your life? What do you do?
So
Because you go into entrepreneurship, no?
yes, but it was kind of a roundabout way as to how I got there. So I in college, as like a junior and senior, I became super passionate in fitness, and I basically built out a private training clientele.
Mm,
I built out a private training clientele that I was training, house to house to house while I was in college. And
yeah.
when I graduated, I applied for finance jobs and I applied for fitness jobs. And what I found was a lot of the entry level roles in finance were like at the time 60 to 65K a year.
Mm,
And so I found an opportunity in fitness where I said, "Hey, I could get to a point in which I'm making six figures a year in the next 9 to 12 months." And
mm,
so what I said to myself was, "Hey, if I do this for a year and I'm unsuccessful, then I just fall back on my degree and I go accept the job that I would have taken anyway." But the
yeah.
upside is that I can go make 50% more money potentially. And
Yeah.
so I opted to go into fitness. I worked at a really high end fitness facility called Equinox in Chestnut Hill. And
Hmm.
what ended up happening was I became a top performer there in a matter of 9 months. I was making six figures. And then what was super interesting about this is that I was being paid to coach basically a class of people that were all either doctors, lawyers, high end
Mm,
surgeons, medical professionals, entrepreneurs, C-suite executives. Like these are no BS people. And
mm,
I had hours per week of their calendar, and I had
yeah.
15 to 20 of them
Huh.
15 to 20 people. So what
Yeah.
ended up happening was I then sort of utilized my time to sort of become more versed in concepts that were more intricate. We weren't talking about what's the weather outside and how's your family and how's how swim lessons. Like I was talking about real life shit with them. I was talking to them about finances, politics, economics. I was talking deep-seated stuff so that I could
Mm,
become more versed and become ultimately with the objective of understanding how they got to where they were at right now and understanding also what they were doing with the resources that they had now at that point. And
right.
and so this became almost like it's like I was being paid, but at the same time, these people were sort of quasi mentoring me, you know?
Mm, mm. So this was a conscious effort on your part to get those clients, or was it more? It was
It was more
coincidence
you
that you got them,
it's more you end up
but
with what you end up with, and
oh,
by
and
association the environment lends itself to every single person isn't just a Joe Schmo.
right. And that's when you made the conscious choice of like, okay, because I have these people, or that do all these things, I'm going to try and learn a little bit more from them, right? Because I think anyone has a choice, right? I could be in a room with Bill Gates, and I could not talk to him about business, or Elon Musk. It's a choice that you yourself make, and you made that choice. You said, "I'm going to learn from these people," so that's what you did.
Absolutely.
Hmm. And so now you're making six figures. You're at a pretty decent salary, like if you look at the average, right? But you obviously wanted more than that.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. And so, even when I was working at that job and I was making six figures, I actually kept Excel spreadsheets and I was tracking how down to the penny how much money I was making, and I was tracking what my monthly expenditure rate was, and I was basically trying to track as a percentage of income that I retained how much money could I save, and then it became a game of how little can you spend, how much can you earn, and then what percentage of your income can you save, and ultimately trying to optimize that algorithm.
And did you feel like you succeeded at the
Yeah,
time?
I was on average spending $36,000 a year, making over $100,000 a year.
That's pretty good. That's really good. So now you have, 60 plus K saved up every single year. What did you do with that money?
So at the time, I then just like reinvested it into index funds. I did
Uh-huh.
that for about 2-ish years, and then I got to a point where I probably had about 150 um, in liquidity, and then that was roughly around the time in which COVID-19 was kind of on the forefront. And then
Mm,
what I chose to do is my wife and I ended up at the time my fiance, um, we bought a townhouse in that was the it was I tried to find a condo or a townhouse that was the most geographically proximal to Boston at the cheapest price possible. And
yeah.
we ended up buying a townhouse in Maynard, Mass, roughly 30 minutes from Cambridge, that
Hmm.
was a 2 bed, 1 bath with a means to convert a space into a third bedroom. And
Hmm.
we bought it for 240,000. We then ended up living there. COVID-19 came, and I made a decision to separate from the gym and then to pursue running my own business. And I think that during COVID, this was really the only way to do it because gyms and fitness weren't really a thing at that time. So
I see. So you left because of COVID.
that's correct. And at that time, I was driving around house to house to house, training all my clients. And at the time, I
Mm,
was also focusing on trying to improve my knowledge basis of running my own business. I was trying to become versed in the various types of entities. I was trying to become versed in US tax code. I was trying to become versed in ways in which I could optimize the tax burden that I would incur from being
yeah.
self employed. I started listening to two podcasts. It was a financial literacy podcast that was run by two CPAs, and the other one, ironically, was Bigger Pockets. And so
Mm,
I ended up kind of blowing through 100 plus episodes of each. The Zig Ziglar quote, "Mobile University." So essentially, this is what really exponentially grew my knowledge basis, both in regards to financial literacy, but as well as into real estate
yeah.
investing. And
Uh,
what I realized is that if I sold my townhouse and bought a multifamily property where I could live for free, I would inherently reduce my risk exposure because I would not have, a monthly overhead, which would ultimately allow for me to funnel more money back into my business, scale my business, and then with the ultimate intent of generating passive revenue streams and funneling that capital into furthering my real estate portfolio with the end goal of reaching financial independence through real estate.
so that was really the sort of the beginning of real estate for you then, right?
Yeah.
Where you and how did you get into fully into real estate and the business that you have today? So because now you have your fitness business, but how did you then from that fully get into the real estate part?
Yeah. So what ended up happening was over a 2 year span, I basically went from renting space. I went from driving around house to house with clients to renting space from a fitness owner of a facility, kind of like a arbitrage model,
Yeah.
in which I was able to then decrease my travel time, which then allowed for me to take on more business. I was able to then
Uh-huh.
scale my business further. I was able to then hire staff. I was able to build out underneath this person's umbrella. And then I then partnered with a friend of mine, opened my own facility. And at that time, I think a lot of my clients saw the business acumen because they saw the ascent of what I was doing. And, at that point, it was it wasn't really up for negotiation. There was a lot of proof of concept. And then
Yeah.
simultaneously, I had then gone from having, one multifamily that I lived in. I think at the time I had 10 units. So I had bought an additional multifamily, and then I partnered with a friend of mine who's my now business partner and bought a 5 unit. So we had 10 units total. And this was at the time in which the government realized that inflation was running out of control.
Yeah.
They started aggressively increasing interest rates. The stock market went in the toilet. And a lot of my clients that have high financial IQ realized that the forecast for the stock market moving forward was pretty bleak. And so I went to them and I said, "Hey, here is a complete financial analysis on the 3 deals that we have done to date. Here's what our ROI is per year based off of these metrics. Would this be something you would be interested in doing if I did all the work?"
And they said yes.
I will pay. So I said, I live in a house where I live for free. I don't have any overhead. You see that I'm printing money at this fitness facility. So you lend me the money to buy the property. I'll pay you 10% on your money and you get half the upside. And they said, sure, sounds good to me. I can't make 10% in the stock market right now, so I'm down.
Yeah. Why not, right? So that was really the beginning for you and how you got into that. And how did you meet? Because your partner, obviously, for those that don't know, he was also a guest on the podcast, Andrew Freed. How did you two meet? How did you end up together? What was the story there?
As I became more interested in real estate investing and I realized that I wanted to continue to scale, I realized that I didn't have all the answers to a lot of the questions that I had, and I had a lot of questions pertaining to the logistics of real estate investing. So I then began attending local real estate meetups in an effort to grow my knowledge basis as well as become connected with people in my immediate demographic. And I ended up in the first meetup that I went to, I spoke to 3 people total, and 2 of them are now partners of mine. So,
right.
It's just, coincidence alone that I ended up connecting with Andrew. I could tell that he was so one of my principles, like innately as a person, is that inaction is actually a parasite to progress. So any person who is indecisive is immediately off-putting to me because they are essentially parasitic to their own growth. You need to become extremely logical, extremely data-oriented, and very sure of yourself based off of the metrics that you're being provided to take action. And that is what is ultimately going to yield the highest amount of progress and the greatest amount of exponential growth. And I saw that Andrew was a very adamant action taker. And every time I would go to a meetup, we would be in conversations, me, him, other people as well. And what I saw is that every time some sort of point of conflict was brought up, oh, well, I've run into this hiccup, I've run into this pitfall, I've run into this thing that negates my ability to move forward. And his response would be,
a little bottleneck, yeah.
Well, what are you doing about it? And here's 3 solutions. And here's 3 ways in which you can solve that problem. And so what was unique about this is that I would inquire about hiccups that I was having. I would seek information. And then based off of everybody's consensus, I would then go home, I would implement it, and I would come back the next month having implemented it. And I think in unison, he saw I was always coming with questions, but I was always taking action to further the push forward. And
Mm,
so I think that we mutually founded our company. And I think that basically a principle of our company is, it's really two things. It's do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, and take relentless action. And I think that
mm.
those two things have corresponded into us having a disproportionate growth trajectory to other peers in our network.
That was one of the things that really stood out with the both of you. It was the growth of your business. When Andrew told me about the growth that you guys have had over the last few years, I'm like, holy shit, that's pretty impressive. Most people, they end up with, first year, it's like 10 units, 5 units, even maybe one. The next 10, but it never goes exponentially. It's always like very slow progress. You guys went from, I think, zero to, was it 300 in a couple years?
Yeah.
Four, something like that.
It was like 0 to 30, 30 to 130, and then 130 to 3 something.
That's crazy, man. That is actually crazy. But this mindset of yours, right? Parasite in action is a parasite to progress. How does someone understand? Is it? I'd like you to clarify that, because is it only if someone takes a little time to think about a decision, or is it something that no, they don't actually take action at all? Is it because that they just stop? Expand a little bit on that.
So one of the things that Andrew and I share is that we are both on the scale of emotion and logic. We are
Mm,
so far. We're in like the third standard deviation of logic. So
mm,
I'm not approaching any decision base from like how I feel, what I think about the scenario, weighing how it might make somebody else, the implications it might have on somebody else. I'm approaching it from a ones and zeros mindset. So
mm,
I got 5 options. Here's what this option will entail: pros and cons. How much will it net me? How much will I lose? Option two:
mm,
how much will it net me? How much will I lose? And
mm,
at the end of the day, you just have to choose the option that nets you the most and loses you the least. And you got to keep on doing
mm,
that. And
mm,
I think that people get too tied up in like, well, even just for example, I called somebody on the phone yesterday and said, I have a 3 family in a market that you buy property, and it's priced at roughly $100,000 below fair market value. And
mhm.
the person is eligible to buy an owner occupied property, and they want to buy a property in the next town over.
Yeah.
So I call you up and say, hey, I have a lead for you that meets what you are looking for, and you can make $100,000 on this property, but you want to live in a town next over.
Mm,
If you are even pausing one time when I share this information with you, you're done. I'm never sending you
yeah.
anything ever again. Because
Mm,
if you are a novice investor with 1 to 3 properties, and I'm saying here's a property where you can get $70,000 to $100,000 in equity, and you pause, you're done. You can't make it.
it's emotions, right? When it comes to business, I think that approach is so important to have. When it comes to personal relationships and life, how do you deal with that? How do you approach it? Do you use logic as much there as you do in business, or are you able to
I would
separate the
I would say similarly.
interpersonal?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that like I don't view family as like the end all be all. I also don't view, and I don't mean that negatively. I don't view it as like you're beholden to your family and that is all. And
Mm,
what I mean by this is, to me, my family are the people who impact my life positively.
mm,
So I have a long list of friends that impact my life positively. I have a long list of old friends that impacted my life negatively. If somebody sucks energy out of me, if somebody is too challenging for me to communicate with, if somebody is constantly asking for my advice and is not going to take action on what I'm providing to them, or if somebody is ultimately like negatively contributing to my life in any way, they're off. It's gone. And I
Hmm.
basically have just focused on building a circle around me of people that positively impact my life, that drain me of energy minimally to not at all. And the more that I
Yes.
can do that, it allows for me to just be homeostatic, cook, do my thing, grow my business, grow my social circle, and everybody
Mm.
else is happy that you're doing well. Everybody's happy that you're winning. You're supporting them in their wins. And this creates this microcosm of ascent. And
Mm.
I don't have any ill will against, these people that don't view it that way, but I also don't have any time for those people as well.
I mean, I 100% support you in that. I think that everyone should think like that, right? If someone drains you, and it doesn't, you don't, I don't think you have to be logical in that sense to even sense that, right? If you feel drained by someone's presence, you remove them from your life, right? But when it comes to, and
You
I
would
wanted to ask you this, when it comes to your partner that you have, I mean, I've been with several, because I'm a little bit like you in that sense where it's very logical. If I need to move, if I'm going to make a decision, I just write every single point down, what is important to me, and I rate them, 1 to 10, and then I rank them, and oh well, this one is more important for me. I'll go for that. I explained this to a girl, and she's like, I don't think like that. I do what I feel. How would you approach something like that? Like if
So it's interesting that you mentioned this. You had just said a minute ago. Well, of course, it's obvious that everybody should think like this, and everybody should be taking action like this, and cutting off people that drain them, or that that bring out the worst in them. And what I will say to you is, if that were true, every person between the ages of 20 and 30 that was a male would opt to be in a relationship. And the
mm,
reason why I say this is because if you are a single male between the ages of 20 and 30 years old, I will guarantee you that you are spending effort, energy, resources, and time towards finding a potential suitor over and over and over and over and over again. And every portion of that, not only does it set you back, it actually negatively contributes to your life.
mm-hmm,
You are out at bars, spending money, going places, spending money on appearance, spending money on food, on drinks, you're staying up late, you're waking up late, you're not being productive, you're not getting things done, you're not progressing in your career. All of these components tie into because you are chasing something that is contrary to your ascent and your success. And the
mm-hmm,
point that I am making is it is not coincidence that my ascent professionally is directly
mm-hmm,
aligned with me being in a relationship with somebody who supports me implicitly, that I pretty much never get into arguments with, and that
mm-hmm,
only makes my life easier.
mm-hmm,
Is it a
mm-hmm.
coincidence that I've ended up where I've ended up and all of those things are true? I would say no.
So you're saying that men will spend a lot of time. I mean, I do see that, but what about people? Like, should someone settle for the first person they meet, or how do you approach that?
No, I don't think that's necessarily true either. But again, I think that you have to approach it from at all across your entire life. Does this person make your life more difficult in any single way?
Mm.
And like I would literally tell you that my wife does nothing but make my life easier.
Is she as ambitious as you? Does she have this, or is it mostly you?
I think I think she I don't think no, I would say no.
Mm.
I think that she, is passionate about her career to a
Mm.
small degree. I think that she went and pursued a master's. I think that she, got to the type of job that she wanted to have. She makes good, decent money,
Mm.
and I think that she's naturally an introvert. I think that she
Mm.
is very independent. I think she is extremely patient. And
Mm,
I sort of err on the side of, being able to be self-sufficient and independent, you being patient, it's like she would be perfectly fine sitting at home, watching TV, reading a book, taking the dog for a walk by herself. And it
mm,
doesn't negatively impact her in any way. It re-energizes her. And,
mm-hmm.
I think at the same time, she's also fine. She doesn't give a shit if I'm working 60, 70 hours a week, as long as we have allotted time in which we are spending together as well. So
Yes,
I
yes.
also think she looks at it from, the end goal in mind, saying, hey,
Mm,
right, this is how things might be for 7 to 10 years, but then you're going to get 40 on the other end in which this isn't the case, right?
yes,
So
yes.
I think it's all about understanding delayed gratification, understanding what it takes in order to get to that threshold, having a symbiotic viewpoint on the quality of life that you both want,
Mm.
and then being able to mutually support each other and what it takes to get to that point.
I mean, I think that, for young people today, the reason I asked this question as well is because I think a lot of young people today are very much persuaded by what they see online, right? Like how a relationship should look like, what type of woman you should look for as a man. I can only speak as a man because I'm a man as well. And I think for a lot of young men, it's hard out there. Like what you're saying, it's they keep going on dates and dates and dates and dates and dates, and they want to find like the perfect one. If you had to give one piece of advice for young men who are looking for women, and who are very ambitious, who want to achieve a lot, and you've touched on a couple of points here, but what should they look for in a woman? What are some key qualities that they should have that allows a man to work those 70, 80 hours? Is it that they can get some quality time together? Like what qualities should they
I
look
mean,
for in a woman?
I focused on being frugal. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that what I found is that women that were more conscious about financial habits,
Mm-hmm.
I think was one component I cared about. I think in addition, I think patience is a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
If a person does not have patience, they're not going to be capable of accepting delayed gratification in most circumstances. And I think the other piece for me was between the ages of, 16, 17, 18, and, let's call it maybe even 30, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is going to appear as their best self.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that what I cared a lot about is what is this person's habits?
Mm-hmm.
Because person's habits are what dictate who they are over a 30 or 40-year run, right? So I
Yes.
care about, like, does this person care about self-improvement? Does this person care about their health? Does this person care
Mm-hmm.
about you know allocating the resources does this person care about professional ascent? Does this person have goals? Like, I cared more about the intrinsic variables and what that would lead to compounding over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I focused a lot less on some of the other factors.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these are very important points because you go on Instagram and the first thing you see is like, oh, I want this girl, right? And then you meet her, and then habits, parties and
You
sleeping
know,
late, and I've lived that life as well, and I know what an impact it can have on your success, right? When you prioritize socializing and making good impressions on people, you don't have to, but I think it's a plays a big part when you really want to connect with those type of people in a sense that focus on that. Now, moving on, I want to talk a little bit more about your business. So right now, you are currently at 300 plus doors units. What is your vision for the business? Where do you see yourself go from here?
I want to continue scaling the business to a point in which Andrew and I can replace ourselves with a
Mm,
salaried individual that has equity stake in future opportunities.
mm-hmm,
So Andrew and I have our base net worth, and
mm,
then we've built a company that's self-sustaining without us materially being involved,
mm,
in which all future opportunities will be split up in a way that is a little bit more selfless, in which we can provide financial incentive to the individuals that we rely on, that allow the business to function independent of us, and will foster an environment of perpetual growth, because you're essentially implementing this. Have you ever read the book Traction? Talks about,
No, never.
so it talks about what's called the entrepreneurial operating system, which is essentially what you do is you create a role for every person in your company, and then you map out what you want that person's responsibilities to be, and then you create performance measurement tools, key performance metrics that you can track as data in terms of their performance, and then you compensate them limitlessly based off of the metrics. So every person is a part of your organization, but every person in your organization has an unlimited ability to earn based off of their performance, and you promote from within. And so that's sort of the ideology that we've used to sort of craft our organization. And we're very clear about that and forward about that with our team. So, we have 2 people on our team that are equity staked on every single buy and hold property that we buy. If either one of those people were to leave our company, we would have to stop acquiring, and we would have to find an alternative solution, and it would probably take us 6 months to get back up to speed. Now, why I say this is those people are indispensable, really.
Yes.
Because the amount of progress and money that would be made in that 6-month time frame far exceeds what we are providing them in equity per se. But what I will also say is that they look at it and say, hey, Andrew and Zach have built this system that is basically just off into the sunset. And if we hitch our wagon to them, we're only going up from here, and it's only getting better for you. And so every year it's like we're providing raises, we're giving them a piece of equity. Now, we also have 3 people in our organization that are vying for equity right now. So the point that I'm trying to get at long term is we work backwards. We say, hey, how much are we going to acquire this year? Andrew and I are aiming to acquire 40 million in real estate this year. So what we found out is that if we
is that in addition to what you have? Sorry, is that in addition to what you have, or including addition? Okay.
So we're looking to acquire we have roughly 60-ish million under management, and that we own right now. We're looking to acquire $40 million in real estate this year. If we work backwards, every 1% of that 40 million breaks down to $100K in equity for a team member. So now what I do is I go to them and I say, hey, look, you are earning X amount right now. So you have a salary, then you have commission opportunities, and then you are getting that option as well, that equity option. So I go back to them and I say, look, if you're making, let's say you're making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 base, but let's say that your commission opportunities can push you up to 100. And then let's say your equity, if you're 1% staked on each deal, well, you're getting an additional 100 in equity. So now I have a person who says, I'm making 40 or 50 grand. I got 100 grand upside, and I'm getting 100K in liquidity long term. Let's do that over a 10-year model. And you think next year we're going to do more business or less? So now next year we do more.
Definitely more, yeah.
So what I'm essentially saying to you is, if you work for me for 10 years, you'll be a millionaire. It's a fact. And so if that's the case, how much buy-in do you have from every person on your team? And the analogy that we use is, go take the take the strongest dude of all time. Go take Ronnie Coleman. Most people know Arnold better, but go toss him in a rowboat on the Charles River in Boston. You put Ronnie Coleman or Arnold in the rowboat and say, go to town. You could put 10 skinny dudes in a boat next to them, and they're going to win. Why? Because they're all working towards the same goal, and 10 people can do more than one, regardless of capacity, ability, right? So the way that we look at it is, if I'm mapping out, hey, here's where you will be in 10 years if you come in and check the box and do what I'm asking of you. I got 10 people rowing on my boat, and I'll tell you what, they're all jacked. They're not skinny. Because they are all going hard as, complete the sentence.
And for sure, man. So how do you find these people? Because I know a lot of companies struggle finding talent. They struggle finding people who are willing to work hard. How do you find these people? How do you find people who are willing to do that?
We actually asked ourselves this question. So we hired a third party that implements a personality test that provides a graph, and the graph shows a way a person perceives themselves and also what their current job responsibilities are asking of them. So then we say to them, so what we find is we have two graphs. One, which is you at baseline on your own. What do you want to be? What excites you? Then the second graph is what is being asked of you. So what we did is we put this out to our whole organization. And then what we found was every person. So here are people who are appropriately tasked in their responsibilities. Now, we have one person who is tasked completely contrary to their baseline skill set. This person feels like they're drowning.
Yeah.
So now we were then taught by this third party how to analyze the graphs to determine the types of jobs that these people would excel at. We then placed them in those roles in our organization. And then all the existing pieces that we had at the time, we took their graphs and said, hey, if he asked Andrew and I, complete the sentence, if I had X, we would make more money. And then he said, now complete the sentence and give me 5 to 7 answers and then rank them. And he said, great, that's your next 7 hires. And he said, out of those 7 hires, who are they supporting? Go find the person that they would support. Go take their graph, and then let's figure out what are they lacking. Great, we're going to hire somebody who fills that role that complements who you have presently, and it is precisely basically the yin yang to this person you already have on staff. So now every person that you have on staff is going to collab at the highest potential with their counterparty. And now your hiring process is algorithmic. It's not emotional.
Yes. So you're essentially hiring based off of your existing team that you already had. So before, you didn't have like a crazy system to hire. You had some sort of system, obviously, but you implemented this at a later point, and you complemented your existing team with people that could just take them even further. That's really good. That's really cool. And I think this type of hiring is so key, because you look at someone's performance and you think, oh, we need to replace that person. Person is right. And it
has been, when we started this, I was like, yeah, okay. Like, we'll see about this. And then we hired the first person, and it was like, this person was like, it was like as if you just sucked all the personality traits you needed, put them in one vessel, and you were like, here you go. And I was like, this is godly. Like, this is unfathomable how on point this is. And I'm like, we gotta. So
you were skeptical at first
in that direction.
Yeah, you were skeptical at first when doing this?
Yeah, I was skeptical because I was like, it's like the human bias component.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the piece here is that you're not giving anybody any context. So any person, you're not saying, hey, take this and paint me a picture of what I want to see, right?
Mm.
You're having a person just say, describe yourself,
Mm.
right? And it's like a person just describing themselves. Like, it's really hard for somebody to lie about themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But when you saw the first hire, like when you first saw how well they complemented your existing team member, you're like, okay, we just got to 10x this.
Literally.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is some real solid advice for I think a lot of business owners out there that have this, because even the previous company, before I became an entrepreneur, when I worked there, it was like, this person, we should probably replace them. But I was like, well, how can we guide them and coach them? And I never considered hiring an additional person. I thought, how can we make their job easier?
And
The natural conclusion was delegation, but then who do we delegate it to? And then the logical
so, but
would
the
be,
point
well,
is,
someone
in all
else.
of this is that you're not guessing, is this person the right person for the role or not? You have
It's
data that
perfect.
says this
Yeah,
role will be successful for this person. And
yeah.
then now that you definitively know that this person excels in that role, you can then say, okay, in order for this person to be as optimal as possible in this role, what are they lacking? So it's like
Mm,
it's like there's multiple layers to this whole thing.
mm, hmm. Yeah. I'd be very interested in learning more about that.
What I'll say is also, so the part that was super cool about it, so we paid $25,000. This person has bi-weekly meetings with us for the entire year to go over our current organizational structure and our hiring process. Then
Mhm.
this person did a 16-hour course with our
Mm,
team to teach them how to read the graphs. And then
mm,
our entire team was there seeing what we were doing. And what was
mm,
cool is you have somebody who knows absolutely nobody in the group, then pulls up everybody's graph and then is talking about what they would be like to work with in the workplace and is literally just not missing. And then so
yeah, that's so cool.
he's like shitting on me and Andrew on our weaknesses, and our staff is like dying. And then our staff is like, so, and then the other thing too is like, then our staff is like, he's pulling our staff up and he's like, I bet you would like if you had a little more of this. I bet you, it's like, and it's on the nose.
Yeah,
And the staff is like, dude, if we implement this, like it's like, you'll hire the right person to like be what I need.
yeah,
And like the
yeah,
staff is like fucking bought in to no end.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
they're like, this is the best.
This
So,
is so sick. This is so sick, dude. I
because
mean, I think,
it increased buy-in from our team.
of course, definitely. And I think it's so great that you taught your team as well how to read the graph, right? Because you could have easily not done that and just like been like, we're just going to hire them and then here you go, right? But like that knowledge that they learn as well, and it creates, I can imagine it from the sounds of it, it creates an amazing culture as well
Big time.
internally, right?
Big time.
Now, obviously this mindset that you have, right? I mean, you spoke about your early influences, your role models. One thing that we touched on one of our first calls was how you structure your day, right? Because obviously when someone has this mindset of inaction is a parasite to progress as part of their philosophy, when you believe this, you structure your day in a certain way so that you try to have it as little inaction as possible. And this was one thing I thought was really cool was your schedule. So talk to me a little bit about how does your schedule look like? When do you wake up? What do you do during the day? When do you eat? Like when do you shit? What happens?
Sure. So, I'm going to answer this, but I'm also going to say two of my favorite people, and there couldn't be more
Mm-hmm.
opposite, but also the same at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
is Elon Musk
Mm-hmm.
and Kobe Bryant.
Mm-hmm.
And both of
Yeah.
them at different times have come out and made the exact same statement, which is take the average person and take what they do in an average week. The average person works a 40-hour-a-week job. And
Yeah.
the average person for that 40-hour-a-week job is actually probably focused maybe 30 hours of that week.
Yeah.
So now take another person. Let's say that person puts in an 80-hour week. If that person puts in an 80-hour week of focused, intentional action, that person is going to be doing 2.5x the other person. So now, over a 5-year time frame, that person is going to do 12 years worth of productivity relative to the 40-hour-a-week work person. So what I am saying is take Kobe Bryant, take Elon Musk, and take Andrew and myself. The reason we are where we are is because we are simply doing more than everybody else consistently every single day for years at a time. And it's like you cannot match it and you cannot catch up because you can't operate at the same threshold and actually it's like the cars are not traveling at the same speed. So now why I bring this up is that what Kobe Bryant would say is he would wake up at 3 a.m, practice, then he would eat, then he would lift, then he would he would sleep for an hour, then he would practice, then he would eat, then he would sleep, then he would lift. And the point is, he's putting up 1,000+ shots 4, 5, 6 times a day.
Yeah.
And so they asked him about this when he was in his late 30s. And they said, are you scared about the possibility of some of these young guys coming in here and out-competing you and beating you? And he said, point blank, he said, they actually asked him, why do you take so many shots in a game? And he said, it's simple. He said, every other person on this team could not in their lifetime have put up as many shots as I have to be as good at this game as I am just by default. If they started playing at 5 years old, right, and they're 25 years old and they've been playing for 20 years, right, and it's like I've been playing for 30-something years and I've been putting shots up for 5 times as many shots per day as them, like you can't catch me. You can't match my skill set. And it's the same. It's the same thing is true for, Elon. Same thing. It's like, so, for us, we focus on, there's certain metrics that properties that we underwrote, number of deals walked, number of offers submitted. Those are our 3 biggest metrics. And if I'm underwriting more deals, walking more deals, and submitting more offers than the next person, I am going to secure more deals and I am going to ultimately outperform my peers in the sector. And so those are the things that I focus on. And to kind of really come back to your original question, I wake up at 4:30 a.m. every single day. I start working. I work from 4:30 until probably about 6:30 or so. I then leave and go to the gym. I get to the gym around 7. I normally leave the gym around 8:30. And then at 8:30, I normally work 8:30 all the way through about 3:30 or so. I normally eat like at my desk while I'm working. And then at about 3:30 or so, I normally take a break to drive home. Sometimes if I'm driving home, I'll take calls while I'm out. And then once I get home, I'm normally home around like it depends on the workday. Sometimes I'll work till 3:30. Sometimes I'll work till 5:30. But normally when I get home, I'm normally going to sit down, have dinner for an hour. And then some nights I have meetings to go over projects that we have going on, maybe, from 6 to 7:30 or so. Some nights I'll just chill, I'll throw my phone down and I won't do anything from, maybe 6 p.m. on. But I would say in most circumstances, Monday through Friday, I'm waking up at 4:30 and I'm normally done working by probably 6:30 p.m. And on the weekends, I'm normally waking up at 5 and I'm normally working from 5 to probably 11 a.m. So I'm probably putting 6-hour days in on Saturday and Sunday, and I'm probably putting 14-hour days in Monday through Friday.
And the key here, right? The key here is the consistency, right? I think that is the thing, because a lot of people will go through, and I recognize this as well. When I first started as an entrepreneur, this was my biggest struggle, which has improved a lot ever since. But I would have 1 2 weeks of productivity, and I would stagnate, and I would go back down, and I would go up, down, and I was like, just be consistent. Go like this, like, and and here's the trick that I did, because I had like 12, 14-hour days, 7 days a week, but I just couldn't sustain it because I had no time for myself. I said, well, I'm going to reduce my hours and I'm just going to focus on being consistent. And that alone has been the key to a lot more success over the last year. And so, and I think that if you as a person can increase those hours that you put in, so, let's say your focus hours are six days a week, you can increase those to 8, and then ultimately 9, whatever works for you. But if the more you can increase that and the more consistent you are, I think the more success you'll have and the faster you'll achieve your things, similar to what Musk and Bryant does. Zachary, we're closing in on time here, but I want to ask you, and you've touched on a lot of good stuff today, a lot of good stuff. But if there was one thing you'd want to say to an entrepreneur, or, to summarize one key thing that you really want them to take away from this conversation in terms of becoming successful, what would it be?
Write down a list of all the things that you need to do or that are preventing you from moving on to the next step in your journey. Wake up and look at that list every single day and figure out what actions you need to take in order to accomplish those items. Continue to rinse and repeat. Remain confident in yourself and continue to take relentless action and trust your own judgment.
Amazing. Zachary, I really appreciate you for coming on today. If people want to find you, follow you, where can they go check you out?
Yeah, so follow me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at the1099mindset.
Nice. I like it. I'm a man. All right, Zachary. Thank you so much for being on today. I had a real pleasure talking to you and learning from you, man.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Yeah, bye.